Hi guys, this is Christian from Next Level. Today I want to talk to you about a movement that's often overlooked in whether it's CrossFit, athletics, military, first responder, or just general population. It's going to be a tremendous exercise for functional fitness for a multitude of reasons. So the exercise that we're talking about is the overhead walking lunge. Now I'm going to give you the top 3 reasons why the overhead walking lunge is going to be great for strength, great for conditioning, and great for kind of like a rehab accessory purpose as well. So number 1, reason that the overhead walking lunge is going to be so beneficial. First, it's a unilateral movement. So when we talk about a unilateral movement, we're thinking about just working out with one leg at a time or one arm at a time. In this instance, this is really important because in athletics and life and a lot of different instances, you're going to be driving and producing force from one leg versus 2. Here, when you're in this position, the glute's going to kind of dominate the movement that you're doing. We're going to get a really powerful hip extension, which is kind of your first and foremost in sport. Really powerful hip extension, but secondly, the glute's going to help control the knee. And controlling the knee is really important for stability and safety of the knee, but also when we're thinking about strength and just proper movement patterns in general. So that's going to be reason number 1. Reason number 2 is the overhead walking lunge essentially is an overhead carry. So when I have that weight overhead, whatever's locked out overhead, I have to stabilize it from all the way from up in my wrist and my hand down through the upper extremity, into the shoulder girdle, into the core, and down through a solid base. So that's obviously going to require a tremendous amount of stability and strength. Number 3, it's also going to be really beneficial for looking at overall stability of the shoulder. It's a moving exercise, so you are doing a good amount of work moving load from point A to point B. So when you're doing that and moving, it's going to be really dynamic, and we have to stabilize throughout the entire system. So that's hugely beneficial in the aspects we mentioned earlier. So we're going to look at a few cues for this movement, and then we'll dive into the actual movement itself. Okay, so 3 cues that are going to be really important with this exercise. Number 1, when we have that weight up overhead and we're locked out overhead, we want an active shoulder, but an active shoulder doesn't necessarily mean reaching. To have a functional and a healthy shoulder, we need to pack that shoulder into the glenoid cavity, and from there we can then stabilize it. If I reach, I'm not going to get the maximum amount of stability in that shoulder, which is going to be a huge weak link in the chain. Number 2, and probably the most important cue, is that we need to brace the midsection. A common fault that you'll see in this exercise is we'll see a large dumping into hyperextension, which we see with an arch in the back and the belt buckle pointing down. That's in an effort or compensation. If I can't get my shoulder into the proper area to get that weight overhead, I'm going to go into hyperextension so that I can get that shoulder a little farther in flexion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pelvic tilt, pull my belt buckle to my chin, make sure that my core is braced here, thinking about this is going to be really solid and rigid, and then I can allow my shoulder to do all the movement and all the mobility, and that's where the shoulder is going to allow us to get to the right position. So keep in mind that's going to require a lot of mobility throughout that shoulder girdle. However, it can be trained and it can be worked, and if we stay light in this variation, it's going to allow us to get down that road. Number 3 is that we need to consider the position of the shoulder blade. The shoulder blade you can think of as your anchor in this movement. So when I'm up overhead, if my shoulder blade isn't anchored and isn't stabilized, then the rest of the system or the rest of the shoulder girdle and shoulder isn't going to be able to stabilize as well. So when I'm up overhead, I want to think about not only packing my shoulder like we said, but kind of squeezing my shoulder blade back and cinching it down to make sure it's ready to stabilize that weight. All right, let's take a look at the overhead lunge. All right, so we've covered a lot of the key components for this movement. Now, when thinking about the overhead lunge, you really can use anything that you can lock out overhead. So here I have a kettlebell, barbell, dumbbells as well. Anything will work for you. Keep a note when you're overhead and you're locked out overhead. We're going to make sure the wrist stays over top of the elbow, stays on top of the shoulder. That way we can get bone-on-bone contact. Again, I'm not resorting to that hyperextension fault, rather bracing and allowing my shoulder to do the movement. I can lock out 1, lock out 2 overhead, whatever I want. At that point, once that weight's locked out overhead, we're looking at taking a moderate step where the knee slightly comes forward to the ankle. We're going to shove that knee to the outside of the pinky toe. And as I drive out of this position, I'm going to squeeze that glute, come together, and then step. So To get the maximum benefit here, you're going to want to be doing a walking lunge. It has to do with the biomechanics of the movement and getting the proper hip extension. You can do a step back variation, but I highly recommend the walking variation. So to finish up, we're looking at this exercise not only for stability throughout the entire system, stability in the shoulder, but it's going to be great for strength and conditioning overall, whether you're a CrossFit, military, athlete, whatever you're looking at. I hope you enjoyed the video. Take care.